All right, my paper is found on page 211 of the booklet, so it's very nice to, you can take a look at it and follow it. It's, as you say, my paper is quite large, so I'm just going to summarize it very, very briefly. So here's the outline of my talk, the introduction, and I'll talk about, it's a question basically about Koreans, this word Solungus, where does it come from, what does it mean, what's the connection, and there's some very interesting legends, Mongol legends of Solungus that have been very puzzling. They've actually been puzzling Mongolian scholars since the 17th century. And there's a conclusion that isn't sort of much of a conclusion, but first maybe let's start with an introduction. Let's see if this, is it going to show for me? It doesn't seem to. This was a clip from a movie. Let's see, does the movie clip working? Movie clip does not seem to be working. Well, there you go. So what it says, this is from the Zero Effect, and in which he says, if you go looking for one thing, you probably won't find it, because of all the things in the world, you're only looking for one of them. But if you go looking for anything at all, you'll almost certainly find it, because of all the things in the world, you're looking for so many of them. So, all of which is to say, I was looking for the one origin of this Solungus legend and the solution of this problem. And I can tell you ahead of time, I didn't find it. So what I will do is tell you anything at all that is connected with Solungus. With this is a little bit exaggerating, but there's a lot of problems of Solungus and Solungus in Mongolia. One of the problems is the relationship of these words. So for example, Solungus means Koreans. There's also the Solung, which is a Siberian or rock marten, weasel. There's the Solung, that's a rainbow. And finally, there's the Solong, a branch of the Evenki or Mongolized Tungusic peoples. These are from northeastern Inner Mongolia. So what do they have any relationship? Are the Koreans the weasel people? Are they the rainbow people? I just was at a lecture yesterday, and the Korean person was talking about media presentations of North Korea, and she said, "Oh yes, Mongolia. They call Koreans the rainbow people." So, well, okay, Solungus. Yeah, they all sound very similar, but are they actually related? So let me first take the second problem. Let me introduce the second problem of the Solungus. And this is a legend of Bogtsagan Khan. This is the bull white Khan in Mongolia. And the legend goes like this, a lot of words, but I can sort of summarize it pretty briefly. Chinggis Khan goes to the land of Solungus in the direction of the sunrise, Nanorgzuk. So he goes there, and he's delayed by the flooding Fox River, Unigenmurin. Okay? So he sends an envoy. The ruler comes to the river and sends over in a boat Holung Hatang, or Lady Holung. And so she is to be sent as a wife to Chinggis Khan. She comes over together with a Barskir, a tiger yurt, and two Toir Atak Inj. Inj is a Mongolian concept of dowry, particularly of human dowry. That is to say, servant. So when an aristocratic lady would marry from one people to another in Mongolia, she would take with herself people from her own land who would be her servants. So two communities of human dowry, the Bochas and the Solungus, the bulls and the Koreans. At least if you adopt the ordinary understanding, yeah, that's what it is. The bulls, not the ones in Chicago, but another one. Chinggis Khan decrees that, and he makes this interesting thing. The Solungus will present tribute by crossing over, back and forth over that river in the future. It's kind of like Mongols won't actually go into that land, they'll just receive it at the river border. So we got a river border. But without waiting to return home, Chinggis Khan sleeps with Lady Holung in her Barskir, presumably on the other side, on the western side of that. And he's enchanted, he's so bewitched with her that he spends 3 years in the land of Solungus, although actually, technically speaking, he never kind of went to Solungus. It's a little bit odd. After the 3rd year, Argus and Horch or Horch, different versions of it say different things, a quiver bearer or a fiddler, goes to bring him back. And Genghis Khan, he's coming back. He's a little bit nervous. What will Burta think about my new wife? His previous wife, what will she think about my new wife? But Burta has this long poem about how any man, if you're going to have one wife, two wives is better. You're going to have, you go hunting one duck, you get another duck. So it's natural for a man to want more. So all is well. Okay, but not all is well from the historical point of view, because none of this is true. None of it. None of it happened. Genghis Khan historically did not go to Korea or Manchuria. Lady Holang was a Mirkit, not a Solungus. Mirkit are people in what's now northern Mongolia and the adjoining areas of Buryatia. So that's all quite clear in the histories. So that's not really, that doesn't really help us. And we don't know this Bokhatsagan Han. Who is this bull white Khan? Most of the other legends about Genghis Khan, the names are usually, we can go back to them. We have like some weird stories about like Jalal-din or something like that. And that's Jalal-din, a historical figure. Or To Mirgin, we can say, oh, that's really Yelu Chutsai or something like that. But with Bokhatsagan Han, to this day, nobody's really been able to get back to anything historical. So since the 17th century, Mongolian scholars have recognized this. Sagang Sitchin and Shamba Irkiteching, two 17th century Mongolian historians noted they had access to the text of Secrets of the Mongols. They said, wait, Lady Holang is said to be the daughter of Dair Osun of the Mirkit. Why is she now the daughter of Bokhatsagan Han of the Solungus? They didn't really give a solution. All right. Now, there's been a couple of solutions that have gone on. And one of the solutions that some people try to say, well, Solungus isn't really Korea. So a number of Western scholars have also talked about this. They say in Mongolian sources it's Gaoli. And Gaoli is clearly from Gaoli. The Chinese pronunciation is Goryeo. This was the Korean word. Previous scholars have said Solungus is the area of North Korea and Manchuria under the direct control of the Yuan, and/or the cultivated parts of Jurchit or Manchurian country, the part containing cities and villages. Whereas Kaoli, only that's the actual southern three-quarters of the peninsula ruled directly by the Korean king. So if that's the case, maybe Solungus is really, it's kind of more Manchuria than Korea. And maybe it kind of had been migrating south a little bit. Maybe originally Solungus was actually Siberia, and the Mirkit are close to Siberia, so maybe the Solungus and the Solon are the same, and that's how this whole story started. The trouble is, Solungus is Korea. In Imperial Mongol, in Mongol Empire usage, Solungus, there's no, you look at the sources, there's no question, it is referring to the kingdom of Goryeo. The Goryeo dynasty. So, for example, Secrets to the Mongols has Solungus. The Chinese translation of the Secrets to the Mongols directly translates as Gaoli. Also, the campaign to which the Secrets to the Mongols is referring is known in historical records to be a campaign against Goryeo, the dynasty in what's now Korea. John of Plano-Carpini talks about the dukes or the dukes of Solongi. And we can actually identify this person historically with this Goryeo Duke of Shinan. William of Rubrick's official of Solunga turns out, and he reads his decree in a way that's very sort of Korean Confucian court etiquette. He's from the Shumiyuan or the Privy Council's Yihyun. Rashiduddin talks about Ongsun being taken as a hostage from the province of Solanka. This is Goryeo Prince Wangzun, and it's also recorded in Chinese records. Finally, there's the Madam Ki, and we know where she's from. She's from a village on the southern side on Gangnam, as in Gangnam Style. She had Gangnam Style. Togon Temur was very fascinated with her. And so he made her the empress, and he gave her the title Solangajin. That is to say, that was her awak. Her awak was, she was given a Mongol awak as Solangajin. It's a little bit controversial. Koreans previously had received Mongol princesses. They had not taken Korean princesses. But, so all of this shows it really is, Solonga really is Goryeo, the dynasty, the kingdom of Korea. And not only that, but there are some slight complications. Eventually, Rashiduddin does refer at one point to their Solongas in what's now seems to be Shenyang. But that appears to be a Yuan dynasty thing. The Yuan dynasty in the middle of the Mongol Empire, in the middle, they installed some princes of Goryeo in what is now Shenyang in Manchuria. And they were of Goryeo princes of the Shimwang family. So we also have some interesting references. Solungus is associated with the White Mountain, Solungus, and the Black River Jurchen. And these seem to be kind of associated. So there is some association of Koreans with Jurchen, which is a little bit hard to understand. So Tagan Olin Solungus Harosne Jurchen. So it's Harmurne Harosne Jurchen, black water. It's also probably a white is south, black is north kind of thing. Well, let's take a look at the words then. So the words, it's kind of interesting. We have, what's interesting is that the word for Korea and the word for weasel are similar in a number of different languages. They're quite similar in Manchu, they're quite similar in Mongolian, they're quite similar in Evenki, and so on. But they're not always the same as the Mongolian. So the word for Korean is Solga in Manchu, Salaga or Salawa in Jurchen, Salaran in Solanovenki, and recently discovered Sholwar in Khitan. Khitan's a little bit of an oddball. Why it turned into sh? I don't know. Another thing I don't know. But to make a long story short, many of you Mongolians will know the word Solga. So Yamanigim Solga Yimbara. So Solga means to the left hand. It also means it's the wrong thing. It's not the right way. It's the left hand. It's sinister in the etymological Latin sense. It looks like there is and that root is also attested, sol is attested as the word for left in Uyghur and a number of other languages in that area. So it looks like there's a root called sola, solon, and it means to be on the left hand. And probably the Koreans, so they aren't the weasel people, they aren't even the bad people, they're just the Eastern people. So Solungus, if you take the solon and you add a ga to it, it becomes Solungus, and the is is a plural. So the Solungus are just the Easterners, and all the associations with that word are to the east. They're always described as being the Eastern people. But there's also another meaning. Let's say you're trapping, and you really want to get a sable, because a sable is dark and black, and its fur is very, very valuable. And then you come and you open up your trap, and what do you got? You don't have a sable, you have the wrong thing. It's a weasel, a dumb, stupid weasel, which is almost useless. So that's why I think the weasel became solunga or solri, something like that. It's the wrong animal to have in your trap. This is a little bit conjectural, but there you go. That's my guess. And there's certain suffixes, ga, which is formed solungus, ga, which formed like solre, and so on. And so there's certain complications here. I would say this name and place appears to be something in the 10th century. Maybe those to the south became Solaga, those to the north became Solunga. So there may be reasons for that. And it's possible that the Jurchen Solaga, we could envision Salawa, it's also attested as Salawa, we could envision a path by which it becomes Salong. Salah, Salaga, Salawa, Salah. Something like that. So, but that might not mean they're connected with the Koreans. It might just mean they're also Easterners, because in fact they are to the east of the rest of the bodies of Mongolians. However, there is another possibility which is a little bit can't be disregarded. There's also a Tungusic and Evenki verb called sola, which means to go upwards or to go upstream. So maybe a rainbow, solunga, is something that goes up. It goes up, maybe. Or Salon might be the upstream people, the people who go upstream or live upstream. So again, it's a little bit hard. I think we need some more research into Evenki, Tungusic languages to decide between these two. But I think for Koreans, I'm fairly confident that the association of them with the East, that Solungus basically means Eastern people, seems to be fairly well-grounded. Okay, so let's move a little bit to some of the legends. Now, there's a lot, we talked about, I gave you the summary of that legend. But the interesting thing is there's two Solunguses in this legendary material associated with the Chinggis Khan sacrifice and Chinggis Khan cult and historical text. One is Narin Khan and his Solungus, and they receive Altın Gorgolda, princess, the Golden Nightingale Princess from Kublai Khan. Now this is historical. This is, you can see, this is a legendary version. We don't have, she's not named, the princesses are not named Altın Gorgulday. We don't know of any Golden Nightingale Princess, but that Kublai Khan and the Yuan Dynasty gave princesses to the Koreans is well known. And notice Narin Khan, that's the king of the sun. Again, the association of Korea with the East, it all fits very nicely. So if we just had that first one, we'd be happy. But we do have that second one, which is the Koreans give a wife to the Mongols. Bocha Tsagan Han. Tsagan, white, that's associated with Korea, but it's a bit of a as I said, it's still a bit of a mystery. Now, but it's interesting, we know now, we can find the social context of this legend. The legend is found from around something 15th century, about 1500. So when the legend was being told, it had a social context. Lady Holung, the 4 wives of Chinggis Khan, each had, the 4 primary wives of Chinggis Khan, each had their own horde. It's in English, one of the few English words that comes from Mongolian. So it has, and each horde, or chomchakgir, had attached to it people. So in Ordos, in the early 20th century, Lady Holung's Tomtsagir, or shrine, had 4 som, or arrows, companies of people attached to it. The Solunga som, the Korean som, the Boch som, the bull som, the Heret som, and the Badge som. Now the Heret and the Badge, we don't hear about them anywhere else. It's a little bit of a mystery. But the Boch and Solungas are associated with sort of people around the center, around the core of the Mongol regime, back to about 1450s. So when the story explains where these Bochas and Solungas came from. So if I'm a Bochas and Solungas and I'm in Mongolia, and I'm attached to the Lady Holung shrine, and I ask my mom and dad, hey, where did I come from? Why am I in Mongolia? They would say, oh, once upon a time, your Lady Holung, whose spirit we worship, or whose spirit we still honor in this shrine, she was from the East, and she came, and we came together with her from her country. So this is what this idea of Inj is, the human dowry attached to the tent that they served. And that continued after her death for many generations. So, now, what's interesting is that the images of the Solungas people, we have some other images that are described in the associated with a horde or ordos of Chinggis Khan. For example, they are said to be one of the 4 scouts, the Gazarch, who go out and like as these orda or hordes are moving around in the landscape and even into the lands of the enemies, one of the Gazarchis that help find the path for them is Solungas. Another one is Orankhan, another one's Öret, and a third one is Sartol, or the Turkestanis, people from the west. That's kind of interesting. It's sort of, Orankhan and Öret are definitely known to be associated with the Chinggis Khan shrine from early on. These Koreans are said to eat bloody raw food, tosta idishte, Solungas. I guess they eat raw meat. They're dressed in bullock and hirim, bullock, sable, and squirrel. Now, Korea did export fur to the Mongol, did pay fur to the Mongol Empire as tribute, but it was never sable and it was never squirrel. It was always otters. Sometimes it was tigers, but usually it was otters. So that doesn't really seem to fit. The other thing is also they're associated somehow in some way that's kind of unclear with the shorbok. Shorbok is an old Mongolian term for people who worked in the salt lakes to collect salt. It's a kind of financial salt workers, salters. Salt is not associated with Korea. I mean, there is sea salt, I guess, but salt is much more associated in the Mongol Empire with areas in the steppe where you have salt lakes that are important revenue sources. Go figure. All right. So Solungas and the Bochas, where do they come from? This is like a very speculative, and there's no direct evidence for either of these scenarios. But if Madame Ki became the Mongol empress, there's no evidence, but I think we can get, I would guess, I would put money on it, that she must have had a bunch of Koreans who either came with originally or were sort of made her subjects, because an empress has got to have her own people. She's got to have her own staff. And that would be her inge. And they, because she's Korean, maybe some of them were Korean, but in any case, if she's Korean, they would all be considered somehow kind of Korean. So she's a Salongajan empress, and she had a body of inge. Later on, and so she's in the Mongol capital of Shangdu and Daidu in what's now Beijing in Inner Mongolia. But they flee north. Notice 1368. A couple of years later, she's running off north into Mongolia. And there's a city in Mongolia called Barshot, which is a kind of a center on the Hirlan River. Barshot, Barshart, I don't know, they're kind of sort of similar. Maybe at some point, her people became associated with Holung Shrine. Speculative. Bochas. There is this interesting figure. There's a Jurchen rebel called Wuhanu, or Wuanu. But in Mongolian, Wu doesn't, you can't have it at the beginning of a word. If you say War, Bar, which is pottery, it's actually originally War in Chinese, but it becomes Bar. So it's basically just pronounced like Bar. So Wuhanu, was his Jurchen name. Mongols would say Bohanu. Bohanu is, it's kind of close to Boch. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm reaching. But we could assume he was a Jurchen rebel in 1215, 1233. He was conquered by the Mongols. Maybe when he was defeated, a bunch of his subjects were brought back and somehow attached to a shrine, to one of the Chinggis Khan shrines. We know that that sort of thing happened. Again, there's no direct evidence for this. So what's my conclusion? I can't really give you a conclusion too much about the Salungas and the origins, but I will say in this mystery of Mongolia, in this dark ages of Mongolian history, at least it's not very well documented, of 1350 to 1450, the Chinggis Khan shrines were the key element of continuity. Almost everything comes back to them, seems to come back to them. They're the bottleneck through which all the other things, it's the bottleneck that connects the Mongol Empire to the Mongols of today. So it's a really important topic, and we really should have somebody studying them. That shrine and its text and its literature, maybe as a PhD dissertation. All right, thank you. Bye, Edla.
Thank you very much. We again have about 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah, and Mongols also used to call Korea as a country as Buldenos. So, with your research, have you found any relationship between Solongs and Buldenos in terms of name of this?
Really, that's the same. That's that name. Let's go back.
Gaoli?
Yeah, that's the. But no, hey, wait. Yeah, that's that Gaoli thing. So Guilin Uls is, it turns out also ends up also kind of converging on a name for kind of metal, for like tin. But Guilin Ulus and Gaoli, those are the same. So what I'm saying is, yes, not only are they associated, they're actually exactly the same thing. They have exactly the same origin. They're just different ways of saying the same country's name.
Other questions?
Maybe
Yeah.
yeah.
Go again.
Very happy to hear you about Korea, but I don't know. About your explanation that Solongas could be a Easterner.
Yeah.
But I just remind that Chinese also call Korean people as Eastern Barbarian, Dongyi.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
there should be some connection about maybe borrowed the kind of the name from.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, why the Koreans, from Mongolian perspective, you could kind of see them as south or east, but they're always seen as being east in all Mongolian sources. I'm wondering if this also might be the original language, at least one of the original languages, Khitan, which is we know is a Mongolic language, and as we see, it has Sholvor, which I'm pretty sure is connected to Solga, the Jurchen or Manchu way to say Korea, and from Khitan land, Korea is pretty much directly east. So I think that's probably, in some sense, also just part of a natural geographical understanding of its relationship to Mongolia.
This is Solo is east.
Yeah.
So Go means like the country, maybe.
I think it's probably people. What's interesting is that,
People,
yeah. So if you go back to the suffixes, there's sol and then there's solre. Re is a pretty well-known suffix, something on the left hand, the thing that is like that, whatever the root is. So sola is left, and then solre is thing on the left, or something like that. Solongos, there's some little things, if you want to look at the details, you can look at my paper, but ga seems to be a kind of ethnonymic suffix, or people who are like people on the left, people in the east. But I have to say that there are some details of it that I can't find other parallel cases of, so it remains a little bit speculative. But I think there's evidence, but again, we're talking about a fairly older period.
One more short question, or one short question for one of the first two speakers? Excellent.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker.